the late 1980s, sportswear companies started to produce something called shell suits. Popular with the hip-hop and breakdancing scene of the era, shell suits were garishly coloured, highly flammable, and became the must-have item of clothing for me and my peers during my early teens. Wanting to keep up with the trends, I bought a very nice blue one of the type worn by tennis legend Andre Agassi. However, as my friends would soon point out, it was not blue, it was purple. On more than one occasion since, I have bought what I thought were blue trousers, only to discover later that they were purple or turquoise. And this is because, like 4.5% of the world's population, I am colourblind. Not only that, it also turns out that due to the shape of my eyeballs, I have something called astigmatism. This causes blurry and distorted vision and means that I need to wear 2 pairs of glasses, one pair for everyday use and one for reading. But I only discovered this in my 43rd year. For most of my adult life, I thought that I saw things as they were. It turns out I was wrong. One good reason for me to be cautious with my judgments and careful with my words is that I suspect I rarely see the situation as well as I think I might. In Luke's account of the life of Jesus, we read the following. He also told them this parable. Can the blind lead the blind? Will they not both fall into a pit? The student is not above the teacher, but everyone who is fully trained will be like their teacher. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, Brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when you yourself fail to see the plank in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the plank out of your eye. Then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Luke chapter 6, verse 39 to 42. The context here is that Jesus has just said, do not judge. Perhaps making a stark contrast between his way and that of the Pharisees, who had a reputation for doing just that. Despite these words of Jesus, Christians have also managed to get a reputation for being a judgmental lot, and I must be very careful not to reinforce that idea. Nobody likes the feeling of being judged, particularly if those judgments are incorrect. And I suspect that in certain areas of life, my judgments are affected because I am blind to certain things. My vision is restricted in some ways, and I do not always see things as they are. For example, number 1, I do not see the world as well as I might think. The older I get, the more wary I am of people who talk about politics with a high degree of certainty. I now see the world as a complex place, full of complex people dealing with complex problems. So I am occasionally surprised and alarmed by the way some people speak with conviction about situations and topics they have little first-hand experience of. One of several Hebrew proverbs that I think deals with this states, "Fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing their own opinions." Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 2. This may come across as harsh or even judgmental, but still rings very true for our day and age. Number 2, I do not see God as well as I might think. I think there are 2 opposite errors that people can make when thinking and speaking about God. The first is we can know nothing about God. The second is we can know everything about God. I see the divine as deeper and wider than the ocean, and bigger than the vastness of space. To paraphrase the marvellously named theologian and philosopher Augustine of Hippo, If you could understand God, he would not be God. There is so much mystery surrounding God and prayer and suffering and the Trinity and the afterlife that perhaps we should be careful not to take his name in vain by claiming to speak on his behalf too readily. As the Apostle Paul says in his letter to the church in Corinth, "Now I know in part." We cannot see life as God sees it. His thoughts are not ours. His perspective is not ours. The writer of Ecclesiastes wisely states, "Do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven and you are on earth, so let your words be few." Ecclesiastes 5 and verse 2. Number 3, I do not see others as well as I might think. The subject of prejudice looms large in our news at the moment, and rightly so. Jewish author and historian Professor Deborah E. Lipstadt speaks of the topic in this way. Think about the etymology of the word prejudice. Pre-judge. I have made up my mind, don't confuse me with the facts. Without wanting to overstate it, or indeed judge anyone, I fear that far too many people prejudge in far too many ways, far too often. We are currently in a cultural epidemic of prejudging people before we hear their side of the story, criticising and condemning a person's character and actions before all the facts are known and without due diligence. Facebook, Twitter and other online forums give us the opportunity to publicly share our views on celebrities, politicians, sports people and community figures we have never once met or spoken to. I am not saying that we should never have an opinion. I am not saying that we should never share it. I am just saying that because our perspective is inevitably limited, if we do decide to speak our mind, then it should be done with humility, caution, and informed by relevant research and good listening. The Apostle James gives great counsel on this when he says, "Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." James chapter 1 and verse 19. He is not saying that we should never speak out, or that we should not allow ourselves to be angered by injustice. He is saying that our response should be measured, thoughtful, and educated by an appropriate amount of listening and understanding. How much better would our schools, social media, and society be if this were put into practice? Another good reason for me to be restrained in my remarks are my own faults and flaws. On a few occasions, I have been asked to referee local football matches. Each time I got certain decisions wrong, and sometimes received verbal abuse from both players and supporters. I know from experience that refereeing football matches can be a difficult and thankless task. Yet at times, I still shout at the television during a match if I think the referee has made a wrong decision. Sadly, holding others to standards we could not keep ourselves is all too common. Number 4, I do not see myself as well as I might. It is said that we all have a cross to bear. I wonder if we also have a plank. I appreciate the deliberately comic visual Jesus presents of the man with a large piece of wood in his eye, although I fear I am such a man. And another reason why I should not pay too much attention to whatever is going on in your eye is because I have a fairly significant project in dealing with the railway sleeper in my own. The phrase "to mind your own business" is taken from Paul's first letter to the church in Thessalonica in Greece. In chapter 4 of this letter, he says that one way that we can win the respect of people is by quietly getting on with our work and making sure that we pay diligence to our responsibilities. I do not think Paul is suggesting here that I should be uncaring, unconcerned, or even entirely uncritical, but that I must do my best to, first and foremost, deal with my issues and keep my own house in order. It is all too easy for me to overlook failings that may be glaring to others, but I believe that it is God's good desire that we grow, and it is hard to lead the way if we ourselves cannot see. So my plank must be my priority.